Imagine growing up with 100 cousins who hate you. Imagine being constantly reminded that you're the outsiders, the sons of a cursed father, the ones who don't belong. Imagine training alongside boys who want you dead, learning to fight from the same teachers, eating at the same table, while poison seeps into every interaction. Now imagine that your uncle, the blind king who sits on the throne that should have been your father's, secretly wants his own sons to have everything, even if it means destroying you. This is where childhood rivalry becomes something darker. This is where jealousy transforms into murder. This is where 5 brothers and 100 cousins are forced together in a pressure cooker of resentment, expectation, and royal ambition. Welcome to episode 3 of the Mahabharata. Today, we meet the princes of Hastinapura, the generation that will fight the greatest war in history. But before they become legends on the battlefield, they are simply children trying to survive in a family that wants them dead. When Kunti arrived at the gates of Hastinapura with her 5 young sons, she was returning to a palace that had changed dramatically in her absence. The city was prosperous, the kingdom was stable, but the court was now dominated by 101 children, Gandhari's 100 sons and 1 daughter. Dhritarashtra, the blind king, sat on the throne as regent. Technically, he was merely keeping it warm until Pandu's sons came of age, but that technicality was becoming uncomfortable. He had ruled for years now. The kingdom knew him as king. His sons had grown up as princes of the realm, and now, suddenly, 5 boys arrived claiming to be the rightful heirs. Bhima, the immortal grandfather, received Kunti and the Pandavas with the respect they deserved. He ensured they were given quarters in the palace, proper education and recognition as princes. But he could already see the problem forming. The Kauravas, the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, looked at these 5 newcomers with suspicion and hostility. Their eldest, Duryodhana, was particularly hostile. He was around the same age as Bhima, and from the very first day something about the Pandavas infuriated him. Perhaps it was the way people whispered about them, the rightful heirs, sons of the true king, the ones with divine blood. Perhaps it was the way Bhima treated them with special care. Perhaps it was simply that Duryodhana understood what his father refused to say out loud. If the Pandavas lived, the Kauravas would never truly inherit the throne. All the princes, Pandavas and Kauravas alike were enrolled in the same education. They studied the Vedas, learned politics and philosophy and, most importantly, trained in the arts of war. In this era, princes were expected to be warriors first and administrators second. The boys were trained by Kripa, a skilled warrior and teacher who had served the kingdom for years. Under his tutelage, the princes learned archery, sword fighting, mace combat and chariot warfare, but it quickly became apparent that the 5 Pandavas were exceptional. Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, excelled in wisdom and dharma. He could debate philosophy with priests, understand law better than ministers, and never told a lie. But his combat skills were merely adequate. He was a leader, not a fighter. Bhima, the second Pandava, was a force of nature. His strength was superhuman. He could fight 10 men at once, lift boulders that normal men couldn't budge, and eat enough food for 20 people. In mace combat, no one could stand against him. He was loud, aggressive, and terrifying in battle. The twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, were skilled in swordsmanship and had knowledge of medicine, horses, and strategy. They were beautiful, talented, but often overshadowed by their older brothers. But it was Arjuna, the 3rd Pandava, who truly stood out. Arjuna was a prodigy with the bow. His focus was absolute, his aim was perfect, his dedication was unmatched. He would practice late into the night, even in darkness, training his hands to shoot by feel alone. Kripa recognized that Arjuna had the potential to become the greatest archer in the world, and this recognition was noticed by everyone, including Duryodhana. The rivalry between the cousins intensified with every passing day. It started with small things, insults, pranks, minor competitions, but it quickly grew darker. Duryodhana gathered his brothers around him. His closest companion was Dushasana, his younger brother who would do anything Duryodhana commanded. Together with their other brothers and their uncle Shakuni, Gandhari's brother who had his own reasons to hate the Kuru dynasty, they began to plot against the Pandavas. The first major incident came during a training session. Bhima, being Bhima, was boastful and loud. He would mock the Kauravas, particularly Duryodhana, for being weaker than him. He would eat more food, show off his strength, and generally make himself insufferable to the Kauravas. One day, all the princes went on a picnic by the river. After eating a huge meal, Bhima fell asleep under a tree. This was Duryodhana's opportunity. With the help of his brothers, Duryodhana tied the sleeping Bhima with ropes and threw him into the river. The plan was simple. Bhima would drown, it would look like an accident, and they would be rid of the strongest Pandava. But Bhima didn't drown. He sank to the bottom of the river where he entered the realm of the Nagas, the serpent beings who lived in the underwater kingdom. The Nagas recognized that Bhima had serpent blood through his grandmother's side. They freed him, fed him a powerful elixir that increased his already incredible strength, and sent him back to the surface. When Bhima emerged from the river, wet but unharmed and now even stronger, Duryodhana's face went white with fear. The murder attempt had failed, and Bhima now knew without any doubt that his cousins wanted him dead. Duryodhana didn't give up. If drowning didn't work, perhaps poison would. His uncle Shakuni was skilled in such dark arts and provided a deadly poison that was undetectable and supposedly foolproof. During a feast, Duryodhana arranged for Bhima's food to be poisoned. Bhima, who ate enormous quantities without paying attention, consumed the entire poisoned meal. Within minutes he collapsed, apparently dead. The Kauravas barely concealed their satisfaction. Pandavas were devastated. Kunti wept over her son's body. But once again Bhima's divine heritage saved him. The poison, instead of killing him, sent him into a death-like sleep. His body purged the poison, and after a day he woke up, alive, angry, and aware of yet another murder attempt. This pattern would repeat throughout their childhood. The Kauravas would try to kill the Pandavas through various means: staged accidents, poisoned weapons during training, collapsed buildings, wild animals released into their quarters. Each time the Pandavas would survive through a combination of luck, divine protection, and their own abilities. And each failed attempt only deepened the hatred on both sides. The Pandavas could no longer see their cousins as family, they were potential murderers, and the Kauravas became more desperate, knowing that as long as the Pandavas lived, their own future was uncertain. Bhishma and Vidura saw what was happening. They tried to intervene, to counsel peace, to remind everyone that they were family. But Dhritarashtra, the blind king, chose to remain blind in more ways than one. When reports of these incidents came to him, he dismissed them as accidents or boys being rough during training. He didn't want to see the truth, that his sons were trying to murder his nephews. The situation changed dramatically with the arrival of a new teacher, Dronacharya or Drona, a master of all weapons who was considered one of the greatest warriors alive. Drona had his own complicated history. He was a Brahmin by birth, a priest class, but had chosen to become a warrior, which was unusual. He had studied under the legendary warrior Parashurama and mastered every weapon known to man. Drona had once been best friends with Drupada, a prince who had promised that when he became king they would share everything as equals. But when Drupada did become king, he rejected Drona's friendship, humiliating him publicly by saying that a poor Brahmin could never be equal to a king. This rejection filled Drona with rage and a desire for revenge. He needed an army to defeat Drupada, and the best way to get an army was to train warriors who would be loyal to him. So when he heard about the princes of Hastinapura, he saw his opportunity. Drona arrived at the palace and demonstrated his incredible skill. He retrieved a ring from a well using only arrows, performed impossible feats of archery, and impressed everyone so thoroughly that Bhishma immediately offered him the position of royal teacher. Drona accepted, but on one condition: all the princes must promise that when their training was complete, they would grant him one wish, a guru dakshina, the traditional payment to a teacher. The princes agreed without knowing what he would ask for. Under Drona's tutelage, all the princes became exceptional warriors, but Drona took special interest in Arjuna. He saw in Arjuna the potential to become the greatest archer who ever lived, the weapon he would use to destroy Drupada. Drona's favoritism toward Arjuna was obvious to everyone. He would teach Arjuna special techniques that he withheld from the others. He would praise Arjuna constantly. He promised Arjuna that he would make him the greatest archer in the world. This favoritism infuriated Duryodhana even more. It was bad enough that the Pandavas were the rightful heirs. Now one of them was also becoming the master's favorite, and potentially the greatest warrior in the kingdom. One famous story illustrates Drona's teaching method and his focus on Arjuna. Drona placed a wooden bird on a tree branch and called each prince one by one. He asked them what they saw. The first prince said he saw the tree, the branches, the leaves, the bird. Drona told him not to shoot. Another prince said he saw the sky, the tree, and the bird. Again, Drona told him not to shoot. Prince after prince gave similar answers, describing everything they saw. Each was told to step back. When Arjuna's turn came, Drona asked him what he saw. Arjuna replied, "I see only the bird's eye." Drona asked, "You don't see the tree, the branches, the sky?" Arjuna answered, "No, Guru, I see only the eye of the bird." Drona smiled and told him to shoot. Arjuna's arrow struck the wooden bird perfectly in the eye. This story spread throughout the palace. Arjuna's focus, his dedication, his skill, it all became legendary. And with each story of Arjuna's greatness, Duryodhana's resentment grew deeper. But there was another student whose story reveals the darker side of Drona's character and the rigid caste system of the time. Ekalavya was a young tribal prince, a Nishada, considered lower in the caste hierarchy. He came to Drona and asked to be trained. Drona refused. He couldn't teach a tribal prince alongside royal princes. The social rules were absolute. Ekalavya was heartbroken, but he didn't give up. He went into the forest, created a clay statue of Drona, and trained himself by practicing in front of it, treating the statue as his guru. Through sheer dedication and practice, Ekalavya became an incredibly skilled archer. Some said he might even be better than Arjuna. One day, Arjuna and the other princes were hunting in the forest when a dog started barking loudly. Before anyone could react, 7 arrows shot through the air and sealed the dog's mouth shut without harming it, an impassable feat of archery that required perfect precision. The princes tracked the arrows and found Ekalavya practicing. When they asked who taught him, Ekalavya pointed to the clay statue of Drona and said, "He is my guru." When Arjuna reported this to Drona, he was troubled. Not because Ekalavya had claimed Drona as his teacher, but because Ekalavya's skill rivaled or exceeded Arjuna's. Drona had promised Arjuna that he would make him the greatest archer in the world. Ekalavya was a threat to that promise. Drona went to the forest and found Ekalavya. The young tribal prince greeted him with joy and reverence, touching Drona's feet and calling him guru. Drona acknowledged Ekalavya as his student and then said, "Since I am your guru, you owe me guru dakshina, a payment for the teaching." Ekalavya agreed immediately, ready to give anything. Drona said, "Give me your right thumb." The silence that followed was devastating. For an archer, the right thumb is everything. Without it, you cannot draw a bow, you cannot shoot, your skills become worthless. Ekalavya understood what was being asked. His guru wanted to cripple him, to ensure he could never be a threat to Arjuna. And according to the sacred tradition, a student must give whatever the guru asks, no matter how unreasonable. Without hesitation, without protest, Ekalavya drew his knife and cut off his own right thumb. He placed it at Drona's feet, blood pouring from his hand, and smiled through his pain, honored to have given guru dakshina. Drona took the thumb and left. Ekalavya's career as an archer was over before it truly began. Arjuna remained the greatest archer, but at a terrible cost that he didn't fully understand until years later. This story reveals the cruelty embedded in the system, how talent and dedication could be destroyed by social hierarchy and a teacher's selfish motives. But at the time, Arjuna continued his training, unaware of the sacrifice made to keep him supreme. When the princes completed their training, Drona organized a grand tournament to showcase their skills to the kingdom. The entire city of Hastinapura gathered to watch. Dhritarashtra sat on his throne, listening to descriptions. Kunti and Gandhari watched their sons with pride and anxiety. Bhishma presided over everything with his usual dignified concern. The tournament was spectacular. Each prince demonstrated their skills with different weapons. Yudhishthira showed his proficiency with the spear. The twins displayed their swordsmanship. Duryodhana demonstrated his power with the mace, but the highlights were Bhima and Duryodhana's mace combat and Arjuna's archery display. When Bhima and Duryodhana entered the arena for their mace fight, the tension was palpable. Everyone knew these two hated each other. The fight was brutal and savage, more like a genuine battle than a demonstration. They battered each other with massive maces, neither willing to back down. The crowd was divided, half cheering for Bhima, half for Duryodhana. Finally, Drona stopped the fight before someone got seriously hurt. He declared it a draw, though privately he knew Bhima was probably stronger. This only frustrated Duryodhana further. Then came Arjuna's turn. He performed feats of archery that seemed impossible. He shot arrows that split other arrows in mid-flight. He created fire with one arrow and water with another, demonstrating mastery over divine weapons. He shot in rapid succession, filling the sky with arrows. The crowd went wild with enthusiasm. Arjuna was declared the greatest archer, the supreme warrior, the jewel of Hastinapura. Drona's plan had worked perfectly. He had created a weapon capable of destroying any army. But just as the tournament was ending, just as Arjuna was basking in his glory, a voice rang out from the entrance of the arena. "I can do everything that Arjuna just did, and I can do it better." Everyone turned to see who had spoken with such audacity. A young man stood at the entrance, tall and impressive, wearing armor that seemed to be part of his skin and earrings that glowed with divine light. This was Karna, the abandoned son of Kunti and the sun god Surya, raised by the charioteer Adharatha and his wife Radha. Karna had heard about the tournament and came to prove himself. He had trained in obscurity, knowing he was of low birth but feeling deep inside that he was meant for something greater. He had incredible natural talent and had taught himself much of what he knew. Drona looked at this newcomer with disdain. "Who are you? State your name and lineage." Karna replied, "I am Karna, son of Adharatha the charioteer." The crowd murmured, "A charioteer's son." Charioteers were of the suitor caste, not the warrior caste. They drove chariots for warriors but were not warriors themselves. By the rigid social rules of the time, Karna had no right to even be in the arena, much less challenge a prince. Arjuna stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "A charioteer's son has no right to challenge me." Leave this arena. The humiliation was public and devastating. Karna stood there, his fists clenched, his divine armor glowing, his incredible skills meaningless because of the circumstances of his birth, or rather the circumstances of his adoption, though no one knew the truth. Then Duryodhana saw his opportunity. This skilled warrior had just been humiliated by Arjuna. If Duryodhana could win his loyalty, he would have a champion who might rival the Pandavas' greatest warrior. Duryodhana stood up and proclaimed, "If Karna needs to be a king to compete in this arena, then I will make him one. I hereby declare Karna the king of Anga." Anga was a small kingdom under Hastinapura's control, and as crown prince, Duryodhana had the authority to make such appointments. In one moment he had transformed Karna from a charioteer's son into a king. Karna was overwhelmed. Someone had finally recognized his worth. Someone had given him the dignity and status he deserved. He looked at Duryodhana and made a silent vow. He would be loyal to this man forever, no matter what. Duryodhana had just gained the most dangerous ally possible, a warrior as skilled as Arjuna, now sworn to fight for the Kauravas. The lines were drawn. Arjuna had a rival. The Kauravas had a champion. And the Pandavas had gained an enemy, who would prove to be more formidable than all 100 Kauravas combined. After the tournament, Drona called all his students together to demand his Guru Dakshina, the payment they had promised when they began training. He revealed his request. "I want you to defeat King Drupada, capture him alive and bring him to me." The princes were shocked. This was not a request, this was a military campaign. Drona was using his students as an army to settle his personal vendetta. The Kauravas, led by Duryodhana and supported by Karna, eagerly agreed. They saw it as an opportunity to prove themselves. They marched against Drupada's kingdom with confidence and aggression, but they failed. Drupada was a powerful warrior and his kingdom was well defended. The Kauravas were defeated and had to retreat in shame. Then the Pandavas took their turn. Led by Arjuna's strategy and fighting skills, they attacked Drupada's capital. The battle was fierce, but Arjuna was unstoppable. He fought his way to Drupada's palace and captured the king himself. They brought Drupada to Drona, bound but alive as requested. Drona's revenge was complete, or so he thought. Drona marked Drupada, reminding him of his earlier rejection. "You said a poor man cannot be friends with a king. Well, now I am the guru of princes and you are my prisoner. I will take half your kingdom. Now we are equals, now we can be friends." He released Drupada after humiliating him and taking half his territory. But Drona had made a terrible mistake. He had created an enemy more dangerous than before, an enemy with resources and a burning desire for revenge. Drupada returned to his kingdom swearing vengeance. He performed a great sacrifice and prayed for children who could destroy Drona and the Kuru dynasty. From that sacrifice would be born Drishtadyumna, who would eventually kill Drona, and Draupadi, who would become the wife of all 5 Pandavas and the spark that would ignite the Great War. But that is a story for the next episode. So now we have all the pieces in place. 5 Pandavas and 100 Kauravas, raised together but divided by resentment and attempted murder. Arjuna, the greatest archer, versus Karna, the abandoned son who is equally skilled. Drona, the teacher who has planted seeds of destruction through his own revenge. And Drupada, a new enemy created by the same cycle of humiliation and vengeance. The children have grown into warriors. The rivalries have deepened into hatred. The family that should have been united is instead divided into 2 camps that can barely tolerate each other's existence. Dhritarashtra still sits on the throne, unwilling to give it up. The Pandavas are the rightful heirs, but the Kauravas have the numbers and the possession, and standing between them is Bhima, immortal and bound by his vow, able to see the approaching disaster but unable to prevent it. In the next episode, we will witness the final breaking point, the attempt to burn the Pandavas alive, their escape and exile, the marriage to Draupadi that will bind 5 brothers to 1 woman, the division of the kingdom and the game of dice that will strip the Pandavas of everything and set the stage for war. The childhood is over, the training is complete, the hatred is absolute, and the greatest war in history is now inevitable. This has been episode 3 of the Mahabharata. Subscribe and follow the series, because the story is about to reach its breaking point, and the tragedy is about to become catastrophic.